Om Parat Paratat Savitureniam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yona Prachodayat Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Parapraji Ki Jai.
Parapraji Ki Jai.
All victory and glory to God the Beloved.
All victory and glory to God the Beloved. Jai Bhagwan, Jai Bhagwan.
Om Soham Tattvamasi. Om, you and I are one with the one universal God of all creation and no other. Jai Bhagwanji, victory to that beloved universal I am that I am, which you are.
Jai Bhagwan, Jai Bhagwan.
We will have a rather short satsang this morning. I just spent a week in the hospital and still somewhat fatigued from the experience. I will say this, that hospitals have become places of mechanics. It's wonderful that we have so many machines and tests and things of that sort. But every wonder brings about its opposite as well. And the opposite in this case is we have somewhat lost the art of medicine. I have big fat ankles. It's called edema. We don't know exactly what it's from, but it used to be that you would go to a doctor and he would say, oh, you have edema. We need to fix that. And he would take it upon himself to put you on one regimen after another, or to cut out one thing from your regimen after another, until he found out what was causing it, and it remedied the situation. And now what happens is the doctors almost universally say, oh, you have edema, something must be causing it, but we don't know what it is. And if you have it long enough, it'll destroy the valves in your legs, and then you'll have to wear these silly stockings permanently. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not belittling the doctors. This is the way they've been trained. This is the way they've been brought up. Probably the second to the last real doctor that I've known in my life was a doctor named Edwin Schwartz. I don't know if you could look him up on the internet or not, but he was originally an osteopath, and when the government wanted to consolidate all medical people into one unit so that they could have control over them, they gave all these osteopaths the opportunity to become MDs. And I don't know if he ever did or not, but he was an interesting man, a Jewish man, and his ancestors came across the country in the covered wagons. And he had an old book, which I would give anything to find. In fact, he told me I could have it, but he passed away unexpectedly and I didn't know anything about it. And he probably didn't write it down anyway. It was a big book, and in it were written things like, Cowboy Joe got bit by a rattlesnake, we tried this and we tried this and we tried this, he died. Those are not effective things to do. On the other hand, little Billy got bit by a rattlesnake and we did this, 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 and this, and he survived. Those are probably good things to do. So it was probably the most practical medical manual on the face of the planet. And it was passed down from generation to generation. And I used to go to Dr. Schwartz, he was a friend of my mentors, Henry Fraser. And I'd go to him with a serious case of, I don't know, the flu or a cold or something like that. And he would mix up this concoction that had eucalyptus and menthol and all kinds of things in it. And inject it into me. And within an hour, I would be feeling pretty good, and within 2 hours, I would be feeling great. Well, the last time I went to him for that, he said, I'm sorry, I can't give it to you because the FDA has ruled that eucalyptol has no medical value, so I can't give it to you anymore. I guess he probably died at a good time because he would have gone crazy in this particular era where politicians believe that they can dictate what. If I do a lot of this, it's because I'm having some pain. It's because politicians do a lot of this stuff now. too much. Here's some water, please. And so, while I was in this hospital, there were a whole comedy of errors. It wasn't a comedy, really. But on the way down there, the paramedic put an IV into my arm, and I said to him at the time, be careful because my veins are very thin because I've had a lot of chemotherapy and things of that sort. And so he found one. I was amazed. But as I was laying there in the emergency room, you know, in an emergency room, please, low reflux. As I was laying there in this emergency room, I began telling the nurse, well, this really hurts. I mean, it really hurts. It aches all the way through to my elbow. And I was already on some pain medication, so that meant that it really hurt. And she got very upset and said, that's a good IV. That's a perfect IV. It works just fine. And I was so weak. Ela raised a fuss about it, and she told her to buzz off too. And so what do you do in a case like that when you're so weak? Is you say, well, all right, my mistake. And then they sent me for a CT scan with contrast, which means that they use this IV and they put iodine in your body, and it goes all through your body, and that way they can trace various things. Well, the guy said, if your arm starts to hurt, let me know. And so about a minute into this, I said, yes, my arm's hurting. And he stopped it, and my arm had blown up like a balloon. It was full of, the muscles were full of iodine because, why? Because the IV, the intravenous thing, had blown out the vein. We got back to the room and told the nurse what had happened, and she went into a kind of a New York rage and insisted that that was a good IV. That was a good IV. They must have done something wrong down there. I will still file a complaint against this nurse. Sorry, no reflux from all of this stuff. Hope that does it. Or maybe a shorter song than not. At any rate, what has happened is there's a disconnect in medicine between patients and medical practitioners. One of the interesting things about Dr. Schwartz is that when you would come in, he would do all kinds of things that are unimaginable now. One of the things he'd do is he'd sniff your breath.
Yeah.
He would, of course, clean off a spot, but then you would actually taste your skin. So it tasted like on the back of your hand. Because these were places that you could, and smelling your hair, these were places that you could find out if there were poisons or toxins in the system.
Wow.
You would never find a doctor doing that today, ever. In fact, they hardly ever even touch you. Unless they absolutely have to. And so, we have this disconnect in medicine where the patient is now an object and machines that measure things are are the god of medicine. Now, of course, there are some doctors that aren't like that, but they're usually the older ones, and they're usually getting further between and harder to find. And so, now at this point, I'm on a new medicine, which is a real blessing. And this comes from a couple of doctors that are not hands-off, they're very much hands-on, and they're very unusual people. They're the best of the best, as I know. And I won't mention who they are because they're the oncologists that I go to for this prostate cancer, and they have proven to be wondrous people. And I wish I could mention the name, but they haven't given me that permission, and I haven't asked, so I won't. As with the others, good, bad, and indifferent. So here I am in this state now with still a lot of problems. For one thing, this edema, which no one is doing anything about. Now, Mr. Schwartz, Dr. Schwartz, would have taken this on. He would have come up with a regimen. He would have had at least 10 different things for me to do, and he would have had me come back and see him every week and done whatever he had to do, and made sure that it was going away and eventually gone. It's not so anymore. In fact, it's such that doctors almost say to you, well, what do you want to do about it?
Yeah.
Well, if I knew what to do about it, I would be the doctor and you would be out of a job. And even in those cases where I do know a lot about what to do about something, it's the job of the doctor to analyze the situation and use his art to come up with a solution and apply the solution and make sure that the solution works and that the condition goes away. I don't know what's happened, but it's moving more and more towards this socialist medicine that's in large part to blame for this. And so, depending upon physical things is becoming more and more tenuous. The doctors and the hospitals used to be a place where you could go and you could feel assured that you were going to be healed. My experience with hospitals now is it's a place that you go to get beat up. I came out more bruised and beat up by far than I went in. Not that there weren't some good people there, because they were, but they were mostly nurses. Mostly nurses. And there's some horror stories I could tell about it, but I won't, because that's something waiting to be dealt with. So why am I here today? I can't talk for too long, so I better get to the point. The point is that we depend upon these doctors and nurses and hospitals for almost everything. And they are becoming less and less artists. There are less and less people practicing the art of medicine, and more people who are practicing the mechanics of medicine.
Yes. Wow.
And so where are we going to draw the line? Where do we say that's enough? I don't know. I hope it comes soon, because if it doesn't come soon, it won't come at all. And my purpose here is not to preach politics, but to tell you about God. God, of course, is the ultimate physician. But those who operate or practice medicine in His name in any way can't keep Him out of hospitals. And it's partly by not bringing Him into hospitals that these problems are occurring.
Yes.
So every once in a while, throughout history, God performs a miracle. And in that day, the people who witness that miracle invariably say, "Oh, this can't be real. This can't be true. This can't be the real thing. This person must be a phony." And of course, that's been said about me over and over and over again. But let's be real about this. The reality is that God doesn't ordinarily intervene in human affairs. That's our business. It's our job to make a mess of this planet. It's our job to make a mess of our bodies. It's our job to make a mess of one another. I just read in the local newspaper that, and it's coming close to home, I read in the local newspaper that this guy was just caught. He was one of two people who beat some guy to death in a bar in Hermosa Beach. For what? For what? I mean, I can see punching somebody in the mouth. That's been going on for a long time. You see, it doesn't happen that way anymore. Now, two of these guys who are really brutal, probably studied martial arts, might even be gang members, jump on a guy and beat him until he's senseless, and often the guy dies. What for? So, you see, every once in a while, God intervenes in a slight way. Usually it's rejected, sometimes it's accepted. But if you're looking for God to intervene through a spaceship or through a tree or through, a manhole cover, walking down the street, and you hear God talking to you out of a manhole cover, for God's sake, pull the thing up, somebody's probably fallen down there. And I don't know why it is, it puzzles me, it baffles me why it is that so many people are astounded, baffled, incredulous, that God sends these miracles forth into our world through ordinary people. Now, what should He do? Should He administer an IQ test? Well, we all know that the people with the big fat IQs up there in the political realm and in the scientific realm, they're not doing too good. I mean, should He administer some sort of mechanical test, like He put the square block in the square hole and the round block in the round hole? Why? What should God do to choose the person, the man or the woman, through which He's going to put His grace into the world? Well, I don't know what God does. I've never asked, and He's never told me. If I did ask, He probably wouldn't tell me. It's none of my business. But I can tell you this, that for whatever reason, He usually picks the most unlikely characters you would imagine. Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Rama, Krishna, Abraham, Moses, and so on and so on. These were not good, grand, statuesque people. They were ordinary people. Now we make them out to be Adonis and all of the great statues of time, but they weren't. They were pretty ordinary people. And so it absolutely astonishes me that you or anyone else would be either amazed or incredulous. I love incredulous. Such a lovely word to say. Shows that one has been to college, as I have been. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in behavioral science. And I doubt seriously God took that into account. And I'm pretty sure he didn't check the records in Sacramento and discover that I have a marriage family therapy license. But why anyone should be incredulous that God would see fit to pour forth some measure of his grace and his mercy in this world through me. Am I such a bad guy? I've never robbed anyone, I've never raped anyone, I've never stolen from anyone. I would like a sip of water. You see? I've never done these things. Also, I've never been perfect. Oh, that's not true. There have been a few times I have been perfect when I've been a perfect fool.
Oh.
And those are about the only perfect people on the planet. And I have been among them. And I know them well. So, why is it so weird, so astonishing, so unbelievable that God should see fit to pour forth a miracle or a mercy through an ordinary person, former hippie, psychologist, behavioral scientist, marriage family therapist, carpenter? I'm a carpenter. Photographer, such as myself. What we have to ask these people who are so upset about this, would you please write out the qualifications that God should use, and we'll submit them, and perhaps that's what he'll use. Usually what they want to write out are things that are impossible. Can you walk on water? This is the great one. To which I am always tempted to say, can you form a coherent sentence? Or come up with a question that has some meaning to it.
Yes.
Because even if I said, yes, I could walk on water, you'd say, no, you can't. And I can't walk on water unless it's on concrete. When it's raining and I walk on concrete and I walk on water. And what does that have to do with it anyway? That may be the way Jesus did some of his work. Excuse this action, his knees are aching. Buddha, on the other hand, did his work in a different way. Muhammad did his work in a different way. Rama, Krishna, Moses certainly did his work in a different way. Did Jesus ever make a stick turn into a snake?
No.
Okay, then he must not be Jesus because Moses did.
Sure.
Did Jesus ever part the Red Sea?
No. Oh.
No. No. How could he be Jesus? So this is all a stupid thing.
Yes.
There is no reason why God chose me And there's no reason why God shouldn't have chosen me. I can think of some reasons that I wouldn't have chosen me. Not that I'm a bad guy, I just wouldn't have chosen.
No.
I can even think of some reasons you probably wouldn't have chosen. And I can think of lots of reasons that my critics wouldn't have chosen me. Of course, they don't pretend to stand any higher, they just... You see, the neat thing about critics, and this is the thing that is always, it's always just rankled me about critics. Movie critics. A movie critic is a guy who goes and watches movies.
Yeah.
And then says bad things about them. Now, a movie critic isn't somebody that goes and watches a movie and says good things about them. Because if you don't say bad things about a movie, at least some bad things, then you're not a critic.
Oh.
Oh,
And people won't give you any credence. No, a movie critic is somebody who goes and sits and watches the movie, says bad things about it. A movie critic couldn't make a movie. A movie critic couldn't edit a movie.
No.
A movie critic couldn't probably even write the script for a movie. A movie critic couldn't do much of anything except sit there, eat popcorn, and watch the movie. But he's a movie critic. What was it they used to say? You know, those who can do, those who can't teach, those who can't teach, write books about it, and those who can't write are critics.
Yeah.
How far down the line do you go? And so, what's happened in this day is something that's happened throughout history. It's not a brand new phenomenon at all. God has put forth a simple but profound bit of His grace into this world through me. Look at me, I'm no big deal. But what I bring is a big deal. And what God has done is a big deal. And those who say nay, 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 should probably check their oaths, because they sound more like horses than people. Why nay? Why no? Why impossible? Oh, because you don't fulfill the prophecies. No, I don't fulfill the prophecies for Jesus. Jesus didn't fulfill the prophecies for Moses or for Abraham. Jesus didn't fulfill the prophecies for Rama or Krishna. That didn't make him not Jesus. I fulfill the qualifications that God has set forth for Maitreya, Kalki Mahavatara Sadguru of the age. And that surprises me as much as it surprises anyone else. So what has God done? Well, He's put me through 3 tests. Now, Jesus hasn't done these things either, okay? And neither is Buddha, neither is Moses, neither is Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Abraham, or any of the rest. The first one was that I would be taken into perfect final union with Him. That is, that I would die, and He would take me into perfect final union with Him, and make me totally one with Him, the same way a drop of water falling into the sea becomes one with the sea. And that He did when I was 8 years old. All I had to do was fall off of a flight of stairs with my brother on top of me and hit a concrete floor. Well, that's not quite as big as walking on water. Certainly. But Jesus didn't do that either. Jesus didn't fall off the second story of His house with His brother on top of Him. And that doesn't make Him not Jesus.
I love it.
And then the next thing was, can I have some of that one? These medicines, they all have one thing in common. They make your mouth really dry. So forgive me for interrupting my discourse, but no, Jesus didn't do that either. And I've never heard anyone say, well, you know, if only Jesus had fallen off a flight of stairs with his brother on top of it, that would prove that he was Jesus.
Yeah. Wow. That's,
You know?
yeah.
But then God asked me to do something else. This is part of the first test.
Mm-hmm.
He asked me to stop being totally one with him. Now, totally one with him means that I had risen above heaven, above hell, above heaven, and into perfect final union with him. I was so far above heaven at that point that heaven was high. I was higher above heaven than heaven was above hell.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness. And so I did. For whatever reason I did. And part of the thing that God set before me was that I would have to return to this world. I would have to forget everything that happened. And that he would give me nothing but a very thin thread, like a spider thread, to follow through this world to get back home to him. And my job was that the first time he did this was by grace. The second time had to be by my own works, by following this fine thread of truth through this world back home into perfect final union with him. Well, I wasn't very good at it. It took me 23 years. And finally, after 23 years, I achieved it. And we're not going to go into how I achieved it. I achieved it. And into perfect final union with God, and I experienced a second death. Nobody else was there, so I don't know if my heart stopped or not, but it was a death nonetheless. When the spirit leaves the body, it's death. You can keep the body going on a machine for months and months and months. When the spirit leaves the body, it was death. So to my good friend Michael, I say, you ought to really take that into consideration, Mike, and before you say, I wasn't dead because my heart might have still been beating.
Yes.
I don't want to say that my friend is one can short of a six-pack.
You don't want to say that.
I don't want to say that, but I just did. You see, he's so blinded by the light that he can't see the simple truths that are in front of it. Whether my body actually stopped breathing or not, I left my body and I went back into perfect final union with God, like a drop of water falling into the sea, completely becomes the sea. Excuse this action. Please don't start a cult of me. It would be a disgusting cult. I'm doing this because my knees hurt. And once again, there I was in perfect final union with God. Now you see, my purpose the second time was, my marching orders was to find a way by which any person could attain perfect final union with God. And since I did that the second time, I thought I had done that. I'm one of those one can short of a six-pack people too. That's why we were friends, Mike. I say that because, you see, I had practiced all of these yogas. I'd practiced Christianity, I'd practiced Buddhism, I'd practiced everything that under the sun, and I put together a system out of all of those. It's a very good system. It's called Adhyatma Yoga Dharma. And I thought that that was what I discovered. And that's why I got to go home in the perfect final union with God. What I didn't know is that that was wrong. Oh, it would get you there if you wanted to spend a lifetime practicing it. And it certainly has a lot of good things in it that will help you in your life. But that wasn't it. And so, then he said, now I want you to go back and finish what we started. And I thought, well, wait a minute, didn't I finish it? I found this system And God's a really hard person to argue with. Because you say something like, well, but didn't I just find the way by which all people can come home to you? And he says, and you kind of fidget and widget and whatever you do when you're one with him. And so he said, now I want you to go back and finish what you started.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was reminded of the suffering of the world. The horrible, horrible suffering. The things that are going on in this world right now. Friends, John Stossel couldn't even come close to exposing them on his television program. The child sex slavery, the debauchery, the butchery, the horrible, horrible lives that people have to live, not to mention disease itself, and things of that sort, starvation, death. It's unbelievable. It's not, if I could even show it to you, you'd say he made that up. But I was reminded of that, and in a moment of extreme compassion. By the way, difference between sympathy and compassion is that sympathy is when you just feel what somebody else is feeling and want to stop it because it's hurting you. And compassion is when you feel what another person is feeling and you are willing to endure whatever pain you have to endure to stop them from having to endure it. Did you catch that?
Yes.
Well, in a moment of extreme compassion, I made a vow to God. I said, Father, I will never again take my own perfect final union with you until I have seen every last soul in creation safely home into perfect final union with you before me. Now I want you to understand that, absorb that a little bit, that I will never take my own perfect final union with you again until I have seen every last soul in creation safely home into perfect final union with you before me. And without even thinking about it, I put myself at the end of the line of all souls going home into perfect final union with God. Now that's not the miracle. Maybe some people would even say that's the one can short of a six-pack. What kind of a fool would do such a thing? But that was what I did. And then came the miracle. Because God then said, because of what you have done, I make this new covenant with all souls, that whosoever will receive the enlightenment of your holy initiation and follow you to the end of his life, I will give to that soul what you have sacrificed for the sake of all souls. In other words, I will give to that soul perfect final union with me. And that soul will never have to be born again, suffer again, or die again, but will live forever in total oneness with me. And then he said, go and give this to all the souls of the earth. Give this new covenant. And I had been put back together enough that I said, or I thought, or I maybe conceived, Father, how am I going to do this? I'm just one person. And he took pity on me. And he said, therefore I will give you this, my supreme promise, that when there are enough souls on this planet who have received the enlightenment of your true initiation and are following you home to me according to my instructions, I will spontaneously and without further need for judgment or reason spread this new covenant into the hearts of all souls. And all souls will have the opportunity to come home in a perfect final union with me. This is called God's new covenant and God's supreme promise. A little more wonderful. So now, whatever happens to me, from this point forward is irrelevant. If I should drop dead and fall off of this chair right now, it makes no difference. Because what happens here is that I have given God's new covenant and supreme promise to 4 of you who are here. And you have the power. You've received 4 treasures. I won't go into all the treasures. But one of the treasures is that you are ordained to transmit my holy initiation and God's new covenant to any person who will receive it sincerely, so long as you give it sincerely. And that when they receive it, they also receive these 4 treasures, and they too are ordained to transmit the enlightenment of my true holy initiation, or the true enlightenment of my holy initiation. Let's not quibble about words. To any other person on earth. You see, by this we can give the entire world God's new covenant. And when there are enough souls on this planet who are fulfilling God's new covenant by following me, and that means following me home to God, because that's the only place I lead anybody to. Following me, then suddenly this thing will take place that I can only call divine critical mass. God's supreme promise will kick into activity, and God will spread His new covenant into the hearts of all souls. And at that point, every soul will have the opportunity to get off of this endless wheel of birth, life, fear, pain, sickness, old age, suffering, death, and rebirth. That's it. That's it. I mean, I don't know what else I can tell you. This is what God said. That's what God meant. That settles it. You know, this in no way contradicts Christianity. If you want to go to heaven, Jesus can get you to heaven. If you want to go to paradise, Islam can get you to paradise. But the only certain way, the only guaranteed way to get into perfect final union with God at the end of this life is through my holy initiation. And by becoming what we are finally, after 25 years, God finally gave us our name. And blessed it is. So by receiving my holy initiation and becoming a Maitreyan, and giving this gift to others, then you win your own place in perfect final union with God at the end of this life. And that's up to you. Free will is one of the highest qualities of the soul. And so, this is what God's done. This is what I've done. If there's any part of it that I would consider to be unbelievable, it would be that I could possibly give up my own perfect final union with God. See, I find that hard to believe even to this day that I did that. And there are times, believe me, to this day, when I've got this prostate cancer that I'm fighting and I've got pain in my body and things of that sort, there are times in this day that I question my own sanity for having done that. But I know I did it for the right reason. And I know I wouldn't take it back even if I could, which I can't. And the other part of my promise is that I would return to this earth and I would live out this life in a normal human body that God had already given me, with all of its woes and all of its ills and everything else. And that at the end of this life, I would enter into the spiritual realm that exists within the hearts of every soul, or all souls, and I would live therein, guiding all souls closer and closer home to perfect final union with God. So this is what I've done, and this is what I've won. If that's that hard for you to grasp, I don't know, it's kind of like basic algebra. It's a little like basic algebra. Now, I didn't get through calculus, so I won't even use that, but it's like basic algebra. It's not hard to conceive. As to the age-old question that so many wise, itinerant, roving masters are so fond of saying, why me? I thought long and hard about that. I don't know. I don't know. I think if I said that I knew, I really would be a phony. How can I fathom why God does what God does? All I know is that He has. And when all souls in this creation have finally stepped across the line into perfect final union with God, then I get to go home. And sometimes it's hard to wait. But that's the story, folks. I pretty well worn myself out here for the day. But that's the story. It's simple. It's not mystical. It's not profound. It's very, very elementary. And if you can't accept it, then you're going to have to look at yourself and you're going to have to ask yourself, why can't you accept it? You know, the gal at the emergency room who insisted that this bad IV must be a good IV because that's what medicine told her. You know, you'd have to question her validity as a nurse a lot more than you'd have to question why God has done what He's done with her. No, I don't mean that with any derogatory sense towards her. So this is who I am, this is what I am, this is what I've done, and this is what I've won. It's so simple. Why you don't come and receive it is what is really stupid. It's sad, it's stupid. I know there are a lot of charlatans, but usually they want something from you, and I just want something for you.
Joe. Yeah, very different.
So, when you're ready to receive my gift, then you come to see me. And with that, I'm going to close this sanctuary. Om Soham Tatvamasi. Om. Father, we are that which you are. Jai Bhagavanji. Victory to that beloved universal I am that I am, which you are.
Jai Bhagavanji.
Paratparaji Ki Jai.
Harapraji Ki Jai.
All victory and glory to God the Beloved.
All victory and glory to God the Beloved.
Excuse me for not kneeling down, but it might become a permanent state. Jai Bhagavanji.
Jai Bhagavanji.
Victory to God the Beloved.
Jai Bhagavanji. Victory to Maitreya.